Playing the wrong tune in the wrong key. Gig nightmares for you and me. Song changed keys and I wasn't ready. Gig nightmares for you and me. Another key change, oh God, oh no. Gig nightmares for you and me.
All right, here we are with Gig Nightmares. And, here we are today with Jon Oriolo. How are you doing today,
Gig Nightmares.
Don?
Wow.
Yes.
I used to have nightmares when I was a kid when I had fevers. I used to call them fever dreams. Then my son Michael had them and he called them fast, slow dreams because things would speed up when you have a fever dream, But yeah, everything's fine. It's a beautiful day. I think it's like high 60s here in New Jersey.
It's beautiful today.
And I met you at Blue Arrow. You were playing in a band that was really great. It's an 80s band.
Yep, 80s Revolution.
80s Revolution. And
you guys got to open up play a few songs for us, all of like the 70s classic rock stars. So I've always loved that. It's things I grew up on.
All the classic stuff.
Yep.
And it's funny, you see kids 18 years old playing classic rock. It's like there had to be something to the era, Not just the music, the whole thing that went with it.
Oh, sure.
So
I was reading that your very first gig was at a local VFW hall in New Jersey at the age of 13. What do you remember from
12.
that gig? Okay, 12.
Where'd you read that?
It was on Wikipedia.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't even know who did that Wikipedia. I read it and I go, wow, I did all that? It's crazy. And there's a lot more since that. But yeah, it was, my first guitar was a Stella. And my family came from Union City originally. And we were at my Uncle Nicky's house, and his daughter, my cousin Judy, had a Stella guitar hidden behind a whole bunch of stuff in their, in quote, playroom, which was in the attic of this old brownstone in Union City. And they had a pinball machine up there and a bunch of boxes. And I was the youngest cousin. I was 7. And I looked in the corner, I saw this guitar, and I said, Judy, what's that? She goes, oh, shit, it's my guitar. I'm hiding it. I don't want to take lessons. I said, can I see it? Yeah, just be careful. I mean, it was like a $10 guitar at the time, probably. I picked it up and I strummed it, and it was like angels flying down from heaven and singing to me. It was magical. I was hooked from that day forward.
Did you ever end up taking lessons, or were you primarily self-taught?
I did take some lessons, but I didn't really last that long. It was in Hackensack, New Jersey. We lived in Bergenfield, and there was an effort from my mother to get me there.
Sure.
But it started me on the way, and then I took lessons at another place later on when I was in my early teens. By this time, I was playing really well because I had friends that took lessons, and after their lesson, they'd come home and show me what they learned, So they kept me for until they had a recital for parents, and I played Malagueña and Honky Tonk, and then after that, their guitar teacher quit. So I was on my own after that, and recorded my first album not long after that.
How old were you when you recorded your first album?
16.
Wow.
And it was produced by Winston Sharples, who wrote the theme music for Felix the Cat, not the Mighty Hercules. Actually, my father did the Mighty Hercules also. That was his son, Win Sharples Jr., but he did Popeye, Betty Boop, Casper, which my father created.
Yep.
Coke out of the Inkwell. He was an amazing arranger. I have such great stories about him.
So where would you attribute most of your composing skills to? Composing
skills and arranging skills are two separate things. So I'll tell you my arranging skills, because I've arranged quite a lot of stuff, was watching Winston Sharples. Win Sharples. He was incredible. He would just sit down with score paper, which is about 2.5 feet long by a foot high, and then it had a room for various instruments on one page, so you could write rhythm section, strings, horns, and they all lined up on the same piece of paper.
Sure.
So he was arranging something for the Felix series. I was 12, and I actually wrote the second verse of the Felix theme song when I was 12. He let me do that. He really liked my abilities, to play guitar and piano. Piano I picked up watching my sister, who was like a child prodigy on piano and violin, and my brother was an incredible drummer. In fact, his birthday, my brother and sister both passed away in a 1 week period. My brother played drums in my band. He passed away. His birthday is on the 28th of August. In any event, I was watching him just arrange out of his head. Wasn't sitting at a piano, just arranging. I said, oh man, Win, I'd love to, sometimes I call him Win, sometimes I'd call him Mr. Sharples, Sharples, like Staples, only with an H instead of a T. And I said, I would love to be an arranger like you. He goes, you want to be an arranger? He put the score down, put the pencil down, took the pipe out of his mouth. He goes, and I'm waiting for like these words of magical wisdom that was going to transport me into the realm of arrangerhood. He goes, you want to be an arranger? I go, yeah, Win, I want to be an arranger. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to be an arranger. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and I'm waiting, and he tore off 4 or 5 pieces of arranging paper, and he handed it to me, and he goes, arrange. I go, oh yeah, I get it. And that's the thing about arranging. When I used to arrange, because I had no formal education, I had an arranging book that Paul Lecker, who did Green Tambourine, Donna, Hey Hey, Cats in a Cradle, producer, writer, arranger, and he gave me this book because he liked the way I arranged, and it was the ranges of every instrument, and the clefs that that the instruments played. It's the first time I saw a clef for a viola. I just knew a treble clef and a bass clef. I didn't know there were other clefs, and that kind of pushed me into learning how to arrange, and that's pretty much how I learned to do everything. It's just doing it,
That's a lot of what music is.
That's what it is.
It does help to have like a little bit of education with some sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially I like a lot of like classic jazz sort of stuff, Miles Davis and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
You learn that vocabulary by playing it.
Different time signatures. Yeah. And there was, so I was arranging this one time. I was at Mercury Records. I worked at Mercury in the 60s. And there was a really great arranger. He was a Juilliard trained arranger. And he's looking at my scores and he said, you know something, Don? And I mean, this guy was talented. He said, I never could arrange, I never could have written that. He's looking at my score. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, that dissonant section there where, the two notes are dissonant, but the Beatles did a lot of that. So, drive my car, beep, 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 the chord that, beep, beep, yeah. It was dissonant, but it was the rank where you would expect a sixth to be was on the bottom, and just the variations like that. And I learned a lot from listening to Beatles stuff and the arrangements, the George Martin arrangements and, Paul McCartney's arrangements and the bass lines, like a lot of what you would call jazz influence with passing tones and, hitting like a C minor, not hitting the root C, but like one of the chords in the minor, or like a C minor, playing like an E flat.
Sure.
Like in the bass. So that was like that, and first time I heard tuning down the guitar to a D tuning.
Sure.
I saw birds and angels then also, when that low E, that low D rather, playing a D chord with that low D, Neil Young, a lot of his stuff he tuned down, and that was also very, very revolutionary for me, although it has been there forever. The sixth chord, she loves you, yeah, 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 yeah. At the last chord, that perked everybody's ears up.
It's just magic.
It was so magic. Music is magic. But, George Harrison said music is the closest thing to God. And it's, you see when you play, people smiling, people dancing, it brings out, it brings out something in a human, and even animals. I sing to my cat. My cat is closes her eyes, and I have one dog just passed away 2 months ago. When I would be playing the piano, he'd sit down by my feet by the pedals. Just come over. I wouldn't call him. He'd just come over and listen, feel the vibration. It's what do they say? Music soothes the wild beast.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. I mean, even just like simple things like playing the current band 80s Revolution, like sometimes I'll just be playing something like Don't Stop Believing, the song I've heard a million times and honestly don't need to keep hearing.
Yeah.
But I'll just, be standing there as the song starts with the piano and the bass and everything, and everyone in the audience has their phones out with the flashlights or the lighters up, and it's just a moment. It's all about just like creating those moments.
It connects people.
Yeah.
Which kind of, if you take it to the spiritual level, it kind of says that there is a point where we are all connected. And if that's music, if that's what it's at the end of the road, that maybe there's a whole musical vibe going on in the afterlife, that's connecting people, with their phones and their flashlights,
Sure. So during your time you've worn a bunch of different hats in the music industry, being a studio musician, arranger, composer. You've gotten the chance to work with a lot of different bands, including the Chimes, the Tokens, the Paragons, the Cupids, Dr. Hook, Gloria Gaynor, however many more.
Lisa Nicole Chan.
Yep. Meat Loaf.
Yeah.
Out of all the different experiences, which one do you think has been the most musically challenging for you?
Well, there's several. I mean, one of the most. I have 10 things on a list of. I have, if I think of them, I have to pull. If I'm driving, I have to pull over to the side of the road and go and scream. Ah! I can't believe it happened to me. One of the things that in that 10, because they're not all musical things that are in that 10. One was a little league thing. One was and then there are a lot of musical ones as well. I played a lot of studios stuff in the 60s and 70s, and I didn't get a lot of the union gigs because Dave Spinoza, Huey McCracken, Steve Mironoff, Lance Quinn, they have some great players, Jerry Friedman, that were getting a lot of the union gigs. So we got Donnie Thomas, who's a great guitar player, don't get me wrong, and he did get a lot of things, and I got my share of union gigs. And you would know when you went to the Union 802 to pick up your checks, some guys would have a pile like two feet high. Steve Gadd, I was behind Steve Gadd one day, and he had like 2 feet of checks, and I'd have like a couple inches of union checks. But we were the demo kings, Donnie Thomas and I. We worked for all the publishers, and we got between $50 and $75 a song, which was usually 30-minute or an hour, and we would do one after the other, usually at Associated Recording or Dick James Studio, all these smaller studios, demo studios they would call them. We were doing demos, and Madonna was singing on the demo, and we got there. It was not usually 9 o'clock. It was when the session started, And she was sitting on the step probably for 2 hours waiting, you know. Barry Manilow sang demos and played piano on demos. Bette Midler did the same. A lot of great singers, you know. Some of them are still my friends, you know, after all these years, from those days, you know. So we were playing a session, and Donnie was doing a Broadway show, and the musicians hated doing Broadway shows because it was so monotonous, right? Now here I am. I never went to Juilliard. I never went to Berkeley. I never went to Eastern Music, you know, all great music schools. And most of my musician friends in the business went to those places, you know. So Donnie said, "Hey, can you sub for me for a matinee in September?" And I think it was March, you know. But you know, he was that organized and that, you know. And I said, yeah, sure. So at the end of the session, he gave me the book, you know, the playbook. And I got into my Volkswagen, threw it in the back seat, forgot all about it.
Oh.
So months went by, playing. You know, I lived in Jersey, drove in, you know. Hey, can you play a 12 string at 4 o'clock on it? Yeah, sure. So I'd go to Manny's, I'd buy a 12 string. All right, you know. Can you play uke on a thing? You know, I get a call, you know, while I was in the city. Yeah. So I went and bought it. I'd buy a uke, right, and play on the sessions, right. So Donnie and I are doing a session, and he says, "You know, you got the matinee tomorrow, right?" I go, "What? What are you talking about, matinee?" I gave you the book like in March. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. You know, and I was feeling so cocky, you know, having just everybody loved everything that I was doing. Everything was just the business was so incredible in those days, right? Mm-hmm. You'd walk down Broadway, or you know, you'd see all your musician friends with gig bags. So you know, all the Blues Brothers musicians that went on to play in there, they were all studio guys, you know, all friends, you know. So I go, yeah. He says, yeah, show up at the, you know, stage door, go down, blah, 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 you know. And so I showed up. I brought a Hummingbird. There was an acoustic part, and Jaguar, Fender Jaguar.
Yeah.
With medium strings. And I restrung it, you know. And the Jaguar's pretty good at keeping a tune. It's one of the best whammy bars in the business, I think. You know, Bigsby, I love Bigsby also, but on the Jaguar, and I put the special bridge on it that they came out with, that just is just fantastic. So I get there. I knew the other guitar player. I can't remember who. This is a long time ago. You know, 40 years ago maybe. I don't know. And I go, hey, I sat down next to him. You know, it was I think it was an 18-piece or a 19-piece orchestra. No. There was 18 or 19, but it was a 22-piece orchestra. So in the union, if it calls for 22 people, even though they only wrote for 19, you'd have to fill it with musicians. So they would just deadhead. They'd sit there and read the trades and stuff. They wouldn't play.
Oh, that's
it's
interesting.
If it calls for 20, if it's a 22-piece orchestra for that theater, you have to fill the 22 seats.
So would anyone pay attention and see that the other musicians aren't
No, because in the
or?
pit.
Oh,
you don't see down in the pit.
Good point.
You know, you may see the conductor, you know, if you're close, but everybody just sitting down in the pit. So here I am on Broadway, never even considered the fact that this is like people practice and hustle and work so hard to be on Broadway. And here I am, this schmuck, you know, from...
Pretty much sight reading, right?
It's all sight reading, you know. And so my sight reading came from teaching guitar. I learned on the job, basically, when I started teaching from beginners to Mel Bay,
yeah.
Up to book, I think I got to 7. you know. So my reading up to sort of the 7th fret was good. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you know, I remember Hall of the Mountain King, Mel Bay, you know, and it went up there, and I struggled with that with students. So here I am on a Broadway show, hadn't looked at the book yet. I opened the book and I almost died.
Oh,
It looked like fly shit on paper.
oh no.
So the other guitar player looked, he said, "You didn't look at the book, did you?" Because he knew me. Yeah. and doing these demos, they're all chord charts, you know,
Yeah.
with an occasional lick written in, you know, like da 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 da, whatever, you know, and then chords, just, you know, line, 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 A minor, line, 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 you
Yeah.
know, 4, 4, 3, 4, whatever. So I go, holy shit! I said, I'm effed. And he goes. I said, look, just do me a favor. Just go over a couple of these licks with me, because it's 2-part harmony, you know. So here's one up on the 9th fret, and it's solely. I mean, it's with the band, you know. So you can't. This is Broadway, you know. You've got 400 years of practice with the group that's in this pit,
Yeah.
you know, all top of the game, you know, and me, right? How's this possible? It's like, you ever see the movie The Great Imposter?
Sure.
You know, I felt like the Great Imposter all of a sudden, you know. And I don't mean the Italian pasta, because that would be good. So he'd show me the lick, and once I could get a lick in my hands, I'm cool. And well, you saw me play. I'm you know, a decent guitar player, and so I would write little notes that reminded me of a song, a lick in a song that gave me I knew where to start mentally. And
Yeah.
it's like association. You know how you associate a word with like the meaning of a word with like a fish, you know, biting a ball, you know, and then that. He goes, look, if you can't play the lick, chink it, you know, mute it, you know, like, and do the timing, like,
Sure.
you know, because my timing was good. You know, I could read 8th notes, half notes, 16th notes, triplets, you know, 17-note runs, you know, triplet runs, you know.
Yeah.
So I got through the gig, and I swear to God, I walked out of there sweating. I won't say the rest, you know, what I felt, but that was an experience. That was an experience and a half. I got to tell you, I would never ever try that again, or ever recommend someone to do that without, you know, having the chops to do it. You know.
Do you think the issue was like just being involved in so many different projects at the time, or what do you think it was?
No, I had like such confidence that I could pull off anything.
Ah.
You know, because I'm having all these lauditudes and platitudes of my playing, you know, on these demos and sessions, and you know, wow, you played great. Oh, that's good. Oh, that was inventive. Oh, thanks for that. That really drove the session. You know.
Yeah.
But it's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother creative thing. I mean, you know, you play in an orchestra, and you better know the part inside and out. Some of these guys weren't even looking at the charts. You know, well, they played you know 7 days a week. You know, or no, like I think the theater was dark maybe one day a week, but matinee they played two times, you know, and it was hard for them to get substitutes because nobody wanted to do it, you know. I mean, it paid scale and paid, you know, it wasn't a bad gig,
Yeah.
but it was monotonous unless, you know, you were happy with playing scales in the basement of your mother's house, you know, for 5 hours a day, you know. Just a different vibe, you know, much different. In fact, something similar to that, when I was at 20th Century Fox, I mean, I'm thinking of these things that were definitely tough issues to get over. I was involved with The Wiz in that 20th Century Fox was financing a Broadway show for the first time. They always did films. And it wasn't going well. So they had me going to the theater for the practices and reporting back, what's going on, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So I came back and it was, I think it was the Tin Man's son. So it was his son. Alan Ladd's son was there. All these like big superstar actors that were still alive in the 70s and 80s, their kids were growing up and, he married Liza Minnelli actually. He was married to Liza. So he goes, what's going on? I said, man, I'll tell you, it's just not cohesive whatsoever. He said, well, what would you suggest? I said, frankly, I would let Jeffrey Holder, who became a very close friend of mine. He was the cola man. Yo, cola. He was from Trinidad. He played in a James Bond movie as a voodoo priest. He was so talented. He was an amazing artist, choreographer. I said I would let Jeffrey Holder. I would fire the director. I would let Jeffrey Holder direct, do the choreography, and do the costumes. He was already doing the costumes and some choreography. And this was the first of many times. It's like, would you put your job on the line? I go, yeah. I was constantly putting my job on the line. When I signed Meat Loaf, will you put your job on the line? Yeah. When I signed Virgin Music, will you put your job on the line? Yeah. So because I have a very good instinct to hear hits and to know, I used to call it chill factor. If I got a chill listening to something, I knew it was a hit. So Jeffrey, they did that. And I was there one day. Jeffrey was low tech all the way. Like he would make things happen with a garbage bag. I mean, he could do, he could transform things every day. It's like, they said, no, you can build an atomic bomb with household products, He did that with The Wiz. So they had to do the tornado. So he said to one of the assistants or a couple of the assistants, darlings, go down to 22nd Street to the cloth places. Get me 400 yards of black and white taffeta and bring it back. So they got it. He hung this up. He had them hang it up, these long pieces of cloth, right? And they hung it on a swivel. And this was in real time. This wasn't planned by an architect, a stage architect. This was on the job. He had them rig this up and put them up. He goes, now darlings, grab the ends of it and run around. And they ran around, and that was the tornado. And it was amazing. Right before my eyes, he created the tornado, right? So I went to Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records, and Ahmet Ertegun and Jerry Wexler, they liked me a lot. I used to get invited to all their parties and stuff. And I said, Jerry, this version, this Ease on Down the Road by Harold Wheeler, who's the arranger, great arranger. He did a version of Ease on Down the Road, and I said, this is a hit. I guarantee it. So he put it out, and I helped Harold and his partner form a record label called Wing and a Prayer Records. And I had, 75 acetates made, which I almost got in trouble for, because the acetates, that's how you did demos.
Yeah.
It wasn't tape. It was a record that they pressed. And I went around to all the discos. I went around to radio stations. I went out to California, and I gave it to the discos, and I got them to start playing it. and broke the record, you know. I used to do that a lot with records. I did it with Lisa and the Cult Jam. That was a touch of genius, I must say, what I did with them. But so the record becomes a hit. So I said I got to Jerry Wexler, I said, you got to do an album. You know, they got great songs in the show and a couple, you know, originals. It's going to be a hit. It'll be a hit album. He goes, okay. I told Harold, you know, you got your budget, you know, let's get it ready and start arranging it, and let's go in and record the album for Atlantic Records. I get a call from Joe Oriolo. We got a problem. I go, what? We're all set. You have to use the musicians from the show, the union. I go, can't do it. They'll never be the same. You got to use these studio cats that play hits. He goes, well, we're going to call the whole thing off. I said, just give me an hour to think about this. I go, oh shit. So I go to A&R Studios, the big studio, and they had this movable wall that could make different sizes. I said, Jerry, listen to me. Hear me out. I went to A&R. They have the wall. I can separate the whole studio. We'll put the studio guys on one side. We'll put the guys from the show on the other side. They can play, but we're not going to record them. We're just going to record the studio guys. Will that work? I go, yeah. He goes, well, it's going to double the budget of this. I said, it's a hit album. I guarantee you're going to recoup this, right? So we're in the studio. I'm there with Harold, and I'm overseeing this whole thing. I said, listen, you record your guys and do it any way you want. You know, just record them and don't record them at the same time. Have them sit there, or you can record them at the end. So that's what was done. So they recorded the album with the studio guys. I don't think anybody's ever done that. I think that's a first for anything like that. And that's the kind of stuff that I figured out. Like with Lisa and the Cult Jam, I executive produced all that stuff with full force. We went in, little studio, we recorded, as it turned out, we recorded like 3 #1 records on the first session in like 3 hours, you know. So I put it out on white label, on my own label, and it went up the dance charts. Billboard went to #1. So I sold it to Mickey Eichner at CBS, and while it was going up the charts, I called Mickey. Oh no, I called Mickey and I said, it's the record's doing great. It wasn't #1 yet. I said, we should do an album. He goes, oh, well, what I did was I did a compilation album. I got the rights for a book that was #1 on the New York bestseller list. It was called Breakin', and it was about breakdancing. And in the breakdance book, it mentioned our Lisa record and also a record that we did called Din Dada. So I licensed all of those records to put in on a compilation, and CBS put it out. It hit the charts, and I said, can you pull Ease on Down the I Wonder If I Take You Home off as a single? No, we don't do that on compilations. So I did it. I pressed it, even though it was on CBS. I had no right to do it, and I started to work the acetates myself on the clubs, and it started going up the charts. So I said, when it started going up the charts, I said, can we do an album? He goes, no, we don't do albums off of records that are on compilations. So I went to England, and I went to CBS England, and I got it released as a single, and it started going up the charts in England. I brought back with me 100 singles, and I had it imported into the States. It's a 12-inch. and it was in Vinyl Mania and all the stores. I brought it to all the disco stores in New York.
Yeah.
So it started going up the charts and selling, and it was listed as in Billboard best new import of a British group. They were from Hell's Kitchen, Brooklyn and Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Lisa, and the Cult Jam, Spanador and Lisa and Mike, you know. And so then CBS went on a convention to Hawaii, and that's when I Wonder If I Take You Home, Billboard listed it as best new 12-inch record to hit, to look at, best import. And I called Mickey, and it was in the morning there. And I woke him up. He goes, Oriolo, what do you want? Because I did a lot of business with CBS, and Mickey was a friend of mine, Mickey Eichner, great guy, passed away a couple of years ago. I knew him for years and years. And I told him the story. I said, we got to do an album. We got to do an album. It's a hit. You know, I went to England, you know, and what's his name from Britain's Got Talent was the A&R guy there at the time. It's a big guy.
Simon?
Simon. Yeah, Simon Cowell. He was, you know, I went to see him at the time. So they gave the okay to do the album, and the rest is history. We had, you know, platinum albums, you know, a couple platinum albums, you know. So that's the way I used to, you know, whatever it took to break a record, you know. There's I did this one record with Barry Oslander. We were partners when we were at Mercury Records. He was an engineer, and we used to do records where I would play everything and he would engineer. I would sing. We'd sell them as singles, you know. And we did it. We had this one hit, Mom's Mabley, Abraham, Martin, and John. Barry had this way of somehow leaving my name off of records because he handled all the, you know. I go, Barry, look, they left my name off or misspelled my name, and, you know. I go, what? He goes, oh, those bastards. I'll take care of that, you know. And we did this one record, the follow-up with Mom's Mabley. The session was Jimmy Johnson on drums, Cornell Dupree on guitar, George Butcher on keyboards, and me on guitar. And Mom's would come in. She used to dress in a suit and tie. And she goes, get me a glass of water. And I'd go get her a glass of water, and she'd take her teeth out, and she'd put the teeth in the water. She was a comedian. You know, I don't know if you remember who she was, you know, but she dressed like a bag lady on stage, you know. When she was walking around, she wore a suit and tie and a hat, you know. But after the session, she came out and she goes, I'm going to take you all out on the road with me, even you, little white boy. You know, and so those are great days, session days, you know. And I used to play a Jaguar, which everybody else played Strats, Telecasters, occasional Telecaster, but mostly Strats. And I was playing on a Benny Mardones record, and Jeff Mironoff was playing the other guitar, lead guitar, and I was playing rhythm. I was playing ching, 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 and I put heavy gauge strings on my guitar, so it wouldn't go out of tune high up.
Sure.
And during the break, it was a Charlie Colello session, but he had Andy Ellis was his best friend, and they studied together. They were both accordion players, actually. Andy Ellis was like almost Colello. Bienda almost Colello, something like that. So during the break, Jeff said, "Oh wow, a Jaguar! Nobody plays that. Can I try it?" I go, "Yeah." He picked it up and it was heavy gauge. He tried to bend. He was, "Oh God!" I'd never forget that. He put it down, you know. But I played a lot of Benny stuff. We were friends.
So you mentioned before having like issues, like union musicians and like having to use certain people in the studio and then not being able, like sorts of issues like that. I bring that up because I think it's just like another one of those things that people don't really realize would be an issue in the music business. Like,
oh God, there was this little guy, Frank, that worked at 802, that would just show up at a session to make sure all the contracts were filled out properly, or if it was the demos were non-union, and they allowed that. It was an unwritten, just turn your head.
Yeah.
But Olmsted Studios had one of the only Mellotrons.
Ooh.
And Mellotrons were outlawed by the union.
Huh?
Because it put string players and flute players out of business.
Ah.
Because it was tape.
Yeah.
They didn't have sampling. It was literal tape loops. Strawberry Fields, that's a Mellotron, the flutes and the strings. So when you played strings on the Mellotron, it was strings, So they had to hide the Mellotron in a closet. And after 5, they would pull it out because Frank was done with his rounds by 5 o'clock. But if he had come in and found that, he would have stopped the session.
That's bizarre to think.
Huh?
That's bizarre to think. Mellotrons being, wow.
Oh, they were banned. Yeah, totally banned. Yeah, and you couldn't double. If you doubled, if you told somebody you wanted them to double their part, they got paid again. So what we would do with string sections, like budgets were low, we'd have four violins, 1 viola, 1 cello, but the guys were so great, right? And then we'd do the part and we'd say, oh, can we do it again? And we would double it. And they knew what we were doing. They said, and maybe we should play that a little out of tune so it sounds like more, And so we would double and triple, so we'd have like 12. And the thing with violins, the thing that makes 4 violins sound like an orchestra is because there are no frets on a violin. So it's to whoever the ear of the player. Nobody with a fretless instrument plays it exactly the same, exactly 440 for A. It'll be 441 or 442 or 439, and then when the section plays that together, there's beating, sympathetic tones, that would play above and beyond the actual notes. So then when you doubled them and they played a little bit off the note, it would sound like 12 fiddles instead of 4 doubled,
Sure.
So that was another trick, another union trick. But the union was very strict, 802. And then if you worked in Jersey, you had to be a member of the Jersey City. I think it was 528. I belong to that also. But scale was like $19.50 for a 5-hour session in a bar. It was like $20. You got less union than if you played in a club non-union.
How's that fair?
Well, it's not. It's not, but, you had whatever pension and whatever else, I still get small checks, like pension checks from 802 from years and years ago.
Are there any, because this is like a little bit removed from my time of playing, like there aren't really, I think there's still technically musicians, unions, but they don't have like the same sort of power that they did.
No power like it used to be.
So like, are there any more just rules and regulations of things like that? Because I've never really got the chance to like experience all that for myself.
Well, I think I think Broadway is still the union. I think they still have the number of musicians per theater. If it calls for 15 musicians, then the score is only 10. You still have to pay 15 musicians. So they would have a hall that musicians, Roseland, would just be filled with musicians, and they would call out flute player for 5 o'clock, or today, or in 2 weeks, or whatever. Anybody, they'd come up and and you would have to assume that being in the union, that they could muster the part.
Sure.
which wasn't always the case. You know.
Yeah, the extent of unions in the music industry, like a lot of places will play, like if we're playing the theaters or whatever, it'll be like union sound guys. We can't bring our own sound guy. Even
Oh,
just,
you
like,
couldn't touch
mix
the
or
board.
anything. Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I did most of all the arrangements of Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show.
Okay.
That was a group before your time, but
I'm
a lot
familiar.
of hit records, right? So when my friend Arnold Capitanelli, they were in Jersey City and Union City, and I think it was around 75. A dear friend of mine, Ronnie Hafkin, was introduced to them by Arnold and Joel Diamond, another friend, one of the last still alive of my old time friends, because I was always the youngest one of the group, you know, and they were a few years older than me, most of them, and they all sadly passed away. So Ronnie Hafkin, who passed away last year, got the gig to produce them. And Shel Silverstein, who wrote Where the Sidewalk Ends and The Giving Tree, and he wrote A Boy Named Sue, and he wrote a lot of the songs for Dr. Hook. Ronnie's mother had a place in Mystic, Connecticut, and he goes, we're all going to go up to stay at the house at Mystic, Connecticut, and you know, I want you to work with the band and you know, get the arrangements together, rhythm arrangements and everything. And because that's what I did a lot of that, you know. So we went up there, and you know, Ronnie had out of his advance bought his first car, because he was a Brooklyn kid, you know, and never needed to drive, you know. So he bought this Yamaha 10-place off-road, like a big Jeep kind of thing, you know, but looked like a military thing. It was very cool. He always and he was a genius. And Ronnie was very, very smart, very smart. He suffered from polio when he was younger. And at one point in his life, he had, it's not relapse, they called it something where spring back, or something where, you know, polio victims started to get, you know, symptoms again. So we're driving along, the whole band and me, and Ronnie's driving. And I said, you know, Ronnie, this thing can go anywhere. He goes, what do you mean? I said, see that field there? We're driving. I said, you could drive in that field. You got four-wheel drive. He goes, no. I said, want me to show you? So he pulls over, and it had lock hubs where you had to, it wasn't automatic. It was in the 70s. So I locked the front hubs. I said, just go down the hill. So he goes off the road like this with everybody in it. And the thing is like this. He goes, Oriolo, you told me I could. I said, well, why are you listening to me? You know? So we had to get towed out. You know, so years later, Shel Silverstein wrote some songs for a Dustin Hoffman movie called Who's Harry Kellman? Why They Saying Those Terrible Things About Me. He asked me to do the score for the outro music. He said it's you have to do it with just 4 notes that are in where Dustin Hoffman is writing a song, and it's da 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 da. He goes, and you have to write an orchestra for that. I said, well, how many pieces can I write for? He goes, whatever you want. I go, really? And it was going to be in Studio C, which was the big, where Frank Sinatra recorded, Ferrani and Taisha, Dean Martin. It was an old church on 34th Street. And Frank Laco was the engineer there, and he wouldn't record multi-track. He'd have to mix everything to 2-track. And you couldn't touch his board, otherwise he would stop the session. You couldn't touch it. You touched a fader and he'd walk off. He was a cranky guy. So
was there any reason why he didn't do multi-track?
He didn't believe in it. He would want it. He would want to be in the creative process of mixing the the orchestra and everything the way he, and he was great at it. All the Frank Sinatra stuff was done 2-track, live, where Frank sang live. Those are all live dates. It was like the first Beatle album. That was all done live, like in 18 hours. Meet the Beatles, some of the greatest songs of all time, So I used to get a lot of the arrangers, the well-known arrangers that liked me, they would give me their scores and the record, the actual record, so I could follow the record and look at their scores and learn, oh, that's a 17 note run up to the chorus, Oh, and it's doubled with a harp, and it's doubled with orchestra bells, so it's like this giant orchestra swell, And the French horns would write in medieval variations of harmony, like da up da 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 like calling in the horses, or the knights, and that was wonderful, and I would see that on their stuff, right? So 2 nights before the session, which was going to start at 9:00, I called Irving Spice, who was a violin player, and he was like this little short guy, like Don, what? He would smoke Chesterfields, filterless Chesterfield, and it seems like most of the violin players were they played in either the Philharmonic or they played the Borscht Belt. So a lot of were Jewish guys, and a lot of the horn guys were Italian guys, because Italians are given an option as a kid, because I know this, because I watched it with all my cousins and everything. If you want to play an instrument, you play the trumpet or the accordion, or you take tap dancing lessons. So I had a lot of trumpet players in my family, right? And accordion players. And a couple chose the tap dancing, and we would go, oh, yeah. Anyway. So I called Irving. I said, Irv, I never conducted an orchestra, a big orchestra. Usually when we did sessions, we did a rhythm section. Then we'd call in the string section, which was like usually 4 fiddles, a viola, and a cello. And so you're dealing with like 5s, And then the horn section, you'd have like, a bone trumpet and woodwind sax who doubled on flute, and But I'm writing for 75 pieces, I never did that in my life, right? So I actually had to double my score paper, put one below the other, and put Scotch tape. So I said, he goes, all right, come in. Okay. Now, all right, 2/4, 4/4, ready? 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and just make sure you give us the downbeat, big downbeat, because we don't look at you after that, after you do the first timing. I said, okay, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, big triangle, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I practiced that night, and so I'm doing I'm writing all night, and I had a copyist. I always wrote in concert C. I didn't do all the keys. I didn't do like an E flat. I like an alto sax. I didn't write in E flat. The tenor sax. I didn't write in B flat. Viola. I didn't write in a viola clef. I wrote in a bass clef, and I had a copyist, George, who would transpose it for me. So I would deliver it, and he would transpose. 2 things that night. One, I'm looking for this special sound that I'm looking at this friend of mine, Laura Crane, an amazing arranger, perfect pitch, and I'm looking at this string line that sounded ethereal, and and underneath it because he knew all the nomenclature, which I learned from reading his scores. And underneath it, he wrote Bismarck Bow. And I go, Bismarck Bow? I never heard of it. So I called him like maybe 10 o'clock at night. The session was at 9 o'clock. I still had to get to my copyist, who could copy in 3 hours. Right? He goes, that's a harmonics. The strings are in harmonics, and they play with the side of the bow, and it gives it a wispy sound. I go, that's what I'm looking for.
Interesting.
So I wrote this thing, and I put Bismarck Bow under it. So I call the copyist, no answer. And I call Irving Spice. Irving, I can't get George. Where's it? Oh, he's probably up in that shack he has up by the Canadian border, and he's probably drunk with some woman. I go, well, I gotta, who copies in concert and transposes? Oh, I don't know, Don. I go, oh my God. He goes, oh, try. Anyway, there was this copy. It was a company. They had, if you went, it was on 52nd Street on the second floor, and if you went up, it looked like a bunch of scribes. It was like 30, 40, like seniors in music school, Juilliard guys, and older people, and all they did was copy for Broadway and radio, and so I dropped my score. I drove in at 5 o'clock, and I dropped my score off. Right. So I'm hanging in the city. I get down to the studio at around 8. I don't know, I slept in the car or something. I don't know what I did, And I'm waiting. So the assistant comes up. I was in my 20s, He comes up and says, you want a baton? I go, no. I'm like, a baton. And I'm on this big podium, right? And I'm waiting, All of Dr. Hook is in the control room. Shel Silverstein is in there. Ronnie Hafkin, the producer. And we're looking at the time, and my score's not there yet. Push button. Donnie, where's the score? Where's the music? It was Buddy Salzman on drums, Joe Mack on bass. I forget on keyboard. Some top, all top guys, So I go, it's supposed to be here, Session starts at 9 o'clock. Musicians are sitting down, 10 to 9, they come in with the scores, and they start handing them out. And the scores are like each one is like, it shouldn't be like that, So I'm up on the podium, and I'm looking, and they're pulling them out like this, and they're ripping pages off and throwing it on the ground and making their own notation. I'm going, I'm going to have to pick this up by listening and following my score, and that's like an E flat, and that's they're going to start, So Irving goes, Don, come here. What's all this? So, like what I would write and what my copyist would do, if the strings didn't come in for 32 bars, in a measure, they would write 32, a line on either side, and you would count 32. You'd rest for 32.
Sure.
They had blank pages.
No.
So the reason being, talking about union, they got paid by the page. So even if it was a blank page, they got paid for that page. So these guys, and he goes, this is like the radio days with the damn union. We had to do the same thing, because they used to be live orchestras and radio shows, the detective shows and all that stuff. And because it was on a stage, the radio stuff. They had a sound effect guy. They had the orchestra there. They had an audience, It was crazy. I still listen to those old shows. So I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to, they're not going to follow 75 pieces, Timpanis, like orchestra bells, belltree, harp player, they're ready. while they're doing that, I start the rhythm guys so they can get the sound with the rhythm guys. Come on, Don, come on, let's go. You know, I go, yeah. I go, okay, let's go. Da, 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 da. And I go, oh man, this is so beautiful. It's perfect. The strings. Da 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 ba ba ba. You know, French horns. Da, da, and then all of a sudden the strings break down and they start to laugh. I go, what the fuck? Don. Irving Spice. They called me over. They said, what's with this Bismarck blow? I go, oh, that's the side of, it's a side, you know, side of the bow in harmonics. And he goes, who told you this? I said, I got it off of Lord Crane's, one of Lord Crane's scores. He goes, there's no such thing. It's like a left-handed monkey wrench. So what happened was, and I was at this session, but I don't remember him being told. Lord was doing a session, and he had perfect pitch, which is it's a curse sometimes. He was listening to the strings, and because he was an amazing piano player, so he yelled to the. He was always busting the chops of the violin players. He goes, will you play in tune? What do you want me to do? Tune my piano to you? And then he went out, and I left the session before because it was at Mercury Records, and I was working at Mercury Records, and he was doing, you know, so the studios were there, and I would always go up and listen to whatever the sessions were. He asked what that would be, and Harry Lajeski, who was the number 2 fiddle player, who was the son of Michael Brown, who produced Walk Away Renee. Harry was like a real card, real jokester, and Harry yelled out Bismarck bow, so I carried it forward, and so they mocked me, but then after that, the whole everything was loose and nice, and we just did the session, you know, like. And I wrote a bridge part, a classical guitar part for Al Gorgoni, who played guitar in all the Four Seasons, you know. But you know, he played on Sonny and Cher. He wasn't in the Wrecking Crew, but whatever was done in New York, he was the guitar player. You know, he's a friend of mine. Is in his 80s, and so I wrote this whole other melody, you know, and because the orchestra broke down, and then there was this classical part with rhythm behind it and pizzicato on the strings, and it just, so after the session I went in, we were playing it back, and Shell said to me, he goes, how'd you get all that out of 4 notes? Because he had this voice, like, you know, a rough voice. Well, it sounds similar to Irving Spice, actually. Don, hey, Don, over here, Don. So when he died, when Irving died, they went in, he was never married, had no kids, just played violin. He had 2 Stradivariuses.
Whoa.
Yeah. And this other violin player was married to a cello player, Elliot, I forget his last name, and he owned Olmsted Studio. Not Olmsted. He owned Scepter Studios, from Scepter Records. He got them.
Wow.
I remember. So that was another arranging almost fiasco that turned out to be great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
How much of a part did you have in the writing of R2D2 We Wish You a Merry Christmas?
I wrote 100%.
Wow.
Yeah, I put the producer down as co-writer. That was the deal I had with him. I wrote all of his B-sides and of Mico Minardo.
Mm-hmm.
I did that with a lot of people. And I worked on a lot of hit acts, you know, to help out. Like all of Gloria Gaynor's vocals, even when I didn't produce her, I produced those because they hated doing vocals. Yeah, I wrote that 100%. I was a little disappointed. I saw an interview that John did. He's supposed to come to Blue Arrow in September.
Oh, really?
Because I started him in the business, you know. And the story, you know, so I wrote this because I wrote a lot of stuff for Meco. He did Star Wars stuff, big hits with instrumentals of Star Wars stuff. So he was doing this collection of songs called Star Wars Christmas. So I wrote the song R2-D2, We Wish You a Merry Christmas. And Lance Quinn did the track, did the arrangements. I was going to sing it, and I had a cold. It was at Power Station. Tony Bon Jovi owned it. And Jon Bon Jovi was there sweeping up. He was doing janitorial stuff for, and I started singing it. I had a call. It was R2-D2, we wish you a Merry Christmas. I said, it started again. R2-D2, we wish you a Merry Christmas. R2-D2. And I read my friend Lance's lips. It was Tony, Lance, and Meco were producing it, and they were sitting together in the control room. And Lance, I could read Lance's lips saying, "Oh yeah, Oriolo sucks today." I said, "I can read your lips, Lance." I said, "Have Jon sing. Jon, come on in, you sing it." He pointed to himself like, "Me?" I go, "Yeah." So I taught him the song, and he sang it, and it hit the charts. It was his first chart record.
Yep, and he was 18 at the time.
Yeah, 18 or 19. Yeah, it was on Capitol Records. Al, what was his name? The A&R guy. I forget. He passed away also. And so he did an interview. He did mention me when he was nominated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but he did an interview on Jimmy Kimmel's show, and Jimmy Kimmel held up the record, and and he goes, "Yeah, I was just a janitor there in the studio, and all I could hear was this old guy, Meco, say, 'Why don't you sing it?'" I go, "What the fuck?" Now, I've spoken to Jon many times after that, and he didn't tell the story, And I tried to reach him. I spoke to his engineer last night, Obie O'Brien, because our friend Lance is not doing well in Florida. Lance Quinn, who produced Runaway, She's a Little Runaway, which is his first big record as the group Bon Jovi. R2-D2, it was Bon Jovi, the Italian spelling.
Yes,
Jon Bon Jovi. And I said, why didn't Jon? I just saw that interview, and he didn't. I don't know, I said, well, tell him that. He sent me 2 guitars that he signed to auction off for the animal rescue that I have.
Yeah.
But I want him to come out, and just because he's pretty magnanimous, he does a lot for a lot of causes, So that was, and I got all the kids of the record executives, I got their kids to sing background on it, which was, I thought, a good political move,
That's smart.
And it didn't hurt, for it to hit the charts.
I was listening to it the other day, and it's interesting hearing how his voice evolved from then to where it was at his heyday.
Oh, it's clearly him. I mean, it's. And then I recorded in his studio in New Jersey. It was at Tonight Show. He invited me to his Tonight Show when he was on a couple of times. We stayed pretty much in touch, but then years go on, But I speak to Obie a lot, and he's been his engineer on all the hits, Yeah, so Obie's still working, But I mean, a lot of people have passed away that I was in the business with, Meat Loaf passed away. Jim Steinman is songwriter who I signed.
Wasn't that within 6 months or so that they passed?
Yeah. Well, no, I think it was a little bit more for Jim. I think Jim's gone for about 4 years. Meat is I think maybe 2 years now, a year and a half. I don't know. I can't keep up with time. When I think something's a year, it's 10 years,
I saw that song from 2007, I'm a Gummy
Misfits.
Bear is on there.
Yeah, Gummy Bear, yeah.
What was your involvement with that then?
I wrote some of the songs on the album, and I executive produced I'm a Gummy Bear.
Wow. That's a credit. Not one I was expecting.
3 billion views. So it's a lot of shit. This I won a Juno Award for, which is a Grammy. And
yeah. Of all the works that you've done, what are you most proud of? I mean, just pertaining to music.
I mean, I'm proud of getting my first gold record. You know, it's like something. It's like anything. You know, you think about and you hear things, and all of a sudden you get it, and it's like the song. Is that all there is to a circus? You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's nice. So, I just really never. You know, pride cometh before the fall. I grew up with the adage, "You're as good as your next hit." I'm proud of some of my art achievements. I was named Artist of the Year in Art Magazine. I was like blown away. You know, there's just so many great artists. You know, to be in that category. You know. Or if some artist that I know, like, you know, on Facebook or something, you know, makes a wonderful comment about something I posted, you know, with my art, you know, it's like, wow, I don't feel worthy of that, you know. Pretty much I don't feel worthy of anything, you know. It's just my nature, you know. I'm more than proud. I feel blessed than proud. I'm proud of my kids, you know. I'm proud of other people, you know, more than I don't want to sound like I'm self-deprecating, but you know, it's pretty much what I do, you know. I mean, I like to tell people what I did, you know, more out of insecurity than anything else, you know. It's like when I was running Robert Stigwood's publishing company, I had a guitar in my office, and some of these writers that would come in, they go, because I was a jacket and tie guy, you know, when I worked at RSO Records, you know. I was like, "You play guitar?" And I'm like, you know, I played on hits. I did, you know. I go, yeah. So but it was a different, you know. I wasn't supposed to do anything like that when I had that gig, you know, because I was at a pretty big gig, you know. I negotiated the Bee Gees ASCAP deal. You know, I'm in my 20s, and I'm meeting with these guys, you know, like these, you know, Eric Clapton. I made his deal for Biscayne Boulevard. Me and Pete Brown, you know, wrote all the Cream hits. He and I wrote Felix the Cat, the movie, together. We wrote all the music together. So I had such a great behind the scene career, you know. And then I sold my company to DreamWorks in 2014, and decided I'd dedicate a lot of my life to animal rescue. So that's why I started Blue Arrow. People ask me, Blue Arrow, where does that come from? So when I was a kid, I loved the movie Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. So I used to build my own bow and arrows, and I'd paint them blue. So my father was a great storyteller. I mean, he would tell a story without stopping to think of the next line. There's no it was just like, so seeing that I had these arrows, and it was always like doing target practice in the back, he would sit my brother and I down, my brother Joe, and he goes, "I'm going to tell you a story." And he would tell a story, better than TV, better than radio, you know. He goes, "It's about Blue Arrow Don and Green Tomahawk Joe. Blue Arrow Don had magic arrows." And he'd go on to tell the story about how Blue Arrow Don was walking through the woods, and he heard cries for help, and he ran towards the cries and looked over, and there was this young guy or a woman or whatever hanging off the other side of the cliff on a root from a tree. Blue Arrow Don would say, you know, "Don't worry, just watch, wait a second." So Blue Arrow Don would run and grab vines from the tree and attach it to his arrow and shoot it right next to the person and attached it to a tree and said, "Grab hold," and, you know, and then they'd swing over and he'd rescue them, and, you know, that kind of thing. So when I was building Blue Arrow, somebody said, well, what are you going to name it? And it just came to my head, Blue Arrow, as an homage to my father, you know. And it's a rescue, and the Blue Arrow was to you know, help rescue people. So that's the story of Blue Arrow.
It's a great thing you've got going on up there.
Yeah.
Before...
And 100% goes to the animals. 100%. I don't take a penny from it. All goes back into, you know, taking care of all those animals.
Before we wrap things up, is there anything you want to be promoting right now, or anything you want to be?
Blue Arrow is, you know, come to Blue Arrow. We have lots of great bands. Your band, you know, I hope you come back.
Oh, we'd love to be back.
I love your singers, the girls. I mean, they really great voices, great harmony. You know, we do the car show. We have the biggest car show in the Northeast. Yeah, I mean, come to Blue Arrow. Come to the car show. Come see the animals.
And the dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for...
There's a lot more. I mean, you know, but I can talk forever, as you can see. And I just touched upon a couple little things.
Yep.
You know?
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me to your lovely home, taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, come on in. I'll show you.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Gig Nightmares. Gig Nightmares is an independently produced podcast made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you enjoyed this week's episode, we would appreciate if you left a rating and a review for us. Gig Nightmares.